Hello, my name is Selena, and I'm a part of the Let's Discuss A Course in Miracles webinar team at the Foundation for Inner Peace. The mission of the Foundation for Inner Peace is to publish, distribute, and discuss A Course in Miracles, and we are holding these Let's Discuss online webinars as an expression of our vision of extending love through A Course in Miracles teachings. Today's session is coming to you live. And as we have time, please know we'll do our best to take attendees' questions. So be sure to submit your question into our Q&A feature. Also, thank you to all who submitted questions in advance at registration. We're also so happy to be able to announce a simultaneous Spanish translation that is available for today's webinar. Attendees can listen to Spanish by selecting the interpretation button in the webinar controls and select for the Spanish channel. For those listening live, we make sure to paste these instructions in the group chat. So before introducing our guests, I invite you to join in prayer. From the text, chapter 2, A Course in Miracles tells us that we can do much on behalf of our own healing and that of others if we think of our situations in this way. I am here only to be truly helpful. I'm here to represent Him who sent me. I do not have to worry about what to say or what to do, because He who sent me will direct me. I am content to be wherever He wishes, knowing He goes there with me. I will be healed as I let Him teach me to heal. Now, it's time for today's Let's Discuss session entitled Forgive and Forget What? While some live by forgive and forget and others maintain forgive but never forget, know that in chapter 17, A Course in Miracles teaches, be willing to forgive the Son of God for what he did not do. So how do we navigate the atrocities of this world, a form without the spiritual bypass of minimizing the suffering of ourselves and others, while still holding the truth in our mind that this never happened in the first place and all is really perfect? Well, we are so delighted to be bringing back our Role of Teacher series for this session to explore the seemingly complex journey of forgiveness through the teachings of A Course in Miracles. And so without further ado, it's a true pleasure to have and welcome our guest panelists. Our foundation president, Tam Morgan, is joined by professional course teacher Carol Howe and course practitioners Robert Hess and foundation volunteer Jim Hagopian. Hello, everyone, and welcome to you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Selena. So welcome to everyone here. Thank you for joining, not just the panelists, but everyone who is tuning in at any time, even months from now. I'd like to start this off by saying that I've been working with, in the past 10 years, a lot of elderly people. And the elderly who have particular challenges, whether it's early onset dementia, late onset dementia, Alzheimer's, or just plain old age, or just myself being 64 and forgetting things constantly, much more than I ever used to. And what does that mean in terms of a practice where we try hard to remember something, but we're forgetting it, and then we get angry at ourselves for forgetting it when it seems to be a natural happenstance as we get older? That's one aspect here. But within the terms of the course, I've been talking to different people who say, I've forgiven, but I've never forgotten. And you need to remember in order to move ahead in a better way. For instance, what happened with the Nazis in Germany. You hear a lot of concentration camp survivors saying, forgive, but never forget. And some say never forgive, but they might not be course students. So I would turn this conversation open to starting first with, what really does it mean when the course talks about forgiveness. Let's start with a good definition. And I am going to ask our professional course teacher, even though we're all teachers, some of us have chosen it as a profession, not me. But Carol, would love for you to step in on this.
Well, thank you for asking that question. It's about the most important one you can ask because there's great confusion from our Sunday school days, so to speak, whether you went to Sunday school or not, about forgiveness being pardoning, that somehow I am victimized by something or someone else, and I somehow am supposed to be okay with that. In other words, I'm supposed to figure out a way to, I don't know, rise above it or something. So we've got, first of all, we've got forgiveness penciled in as pardoning, which it is not in terms of the Course in Miracles. And we also have got it being about someone else rather than about ourselves. Well, if we have those two basic premises incorrect from the beginning, well, we're not going to get very far. So the forgiveness, as the Course understands it, says forgiveness is about our discovering and releasing our own guilt about what we fear we have done or are or something like that. And we cannot do that by ourselves. That's why the Course also makes a big point of saying, when I am healed, and that would be healed of the things I accuse myself of, among other things, I cannot do it alone. I can't sit in my house and say, I'm just fine. What I did is okay. I don't, in other words, that's just ridiculous to think I can just sit there and say some intellectual things and okay, I'm done. Well, no, that doesn't work at all. So our relationships, and the Course talks endlessly about the necessity of dealing with our relationships in a different way. And the way it would say, and that I will say, is that the people who come into our lives that we find problematic in some way are there not to drive us crazy, and not by accident, because they are being mirrors. You can call them mirrors or you can call them messengers. But what they are doing is helping us get in touch with, sometimes completely unbeknownst to us, guilt. Now, guilt is a life wrecker, whether you're consciously aware of it or not. So you go, wow, if guilt is a life wrecker and I'm carrying around guilt and I don't even know it, can you see what a problem that would be? So I like to think of it as if you've got a circle here that represents your conscious mind. And so you're aware of your thoughts about what's the matter with you or anybody else. But underneath it, we'll say, is a much larger circle that represents our unconscious mind. And we have things that we feel guilty about residing in our unconscious mind. It's like, well, now this is a problem. If I've got something going on and I don't know about it, how in the world am I going to address it? So, relationships to the rescue. Out here comes somebody, and they're annoying in whatever way. You might say, since I can't go directly back and forth between my conscious and unconscious minds, but I sure can see what these guys are doing out here. So what's happening, so as the best way to say it, is that this person is being a perfect match for something you accuse yourself of. So this is the first idea, that forgiveness is not what I'm doing to somebody else. I'm partnering with somebody who comes into my life so that I can see exactly what I need to be doing about releasing my own guilt, because who else can release my guilt besides me? It's things that I believe and I'm hanging on to. So what I often will do is, and for all of the people I talk to, like 99% of what people are disturbed by are their relationships. It's like, they did this to me kind of idea. So we want to reframe, first of all, what forgiveness is. It's becoming in touch with my own false beliefs about what's the matter with me, and see this problem of some of it I don't even know. And you might say, well, how can you not know that? Well, here's how. Because we carry with us notions about ourselves that were incorporated before we were 3 years old. We did not do it intellectually because I don't have a functioning left brain yet, so I'm not able to think. But in the environment in which I find myself, and I sort of learn instinctively and intuitively who or what is safe to go toward, who isn't, and so on. Well, in those early years, we're now speaking at the time and space level, because that's where most of us are focusing our attention. It's like we automatically, there's no intellect, there's no thinking, but we automatically then take those early experiences intuitively. And then once we're about 3 years old and we start to build an ego self, and much of this nonsense that inevitably gets kind of incorporated is built into my sense of self, my ego self. And it's always going to include negative stuff. It's just the way this process works. We don't know it's not true. We don't know how it happens, but we do know that somehow we get to be adults and we think this is the matter with us and that's the matter with us. And the two most common things I hear, having talked to so many countless people, I don't even know, hundreds and hundreds about this very topic, people will acknowledge, I feel unworthy, or they don't say I feel, they'll say I am unworthy or undeserving. And that is representative of, you might say, these painful notions that are totally 100% false, but we don't know that. And so as we carry this around with us, along comes a somebody who's going to, you might say, stick their finger in this wound that got built in long ago. And so they, in a sense, bring up into my conscious awareness what I really fear about myself, what I feel guilty about. And so, well, okay, if we can reframe what needs to happen, which is to discover things that got built in that I don't even know when or how they got built in. And I can't let go of anything I don't even know exists. So this is the helpful nature of relationships, so that the best way you can possibly think of that is that this problematic person out here is being a mirror. So they are not causing your pain. They are revealing your pain to you that you're unaware of in many ways. And until we get this scenario straight, then nothing makes any sense to us. And we wonder, like, why things continue to be a problem. So if you could imagine that your world, this is a fundamental premise of the course, that your world is like a giant 360-degree mirror. And this mirror is revealing to you what you think, what you believe is true, not what you just think is something you made up, but you really think is true. And all of the metaphysical studies that carry any weight all say the same thing, that our world of time and space is an outer reflection in every detail of this inner state of mind, which includes garbage that we believe about ourselves, except we don't understand where it came from, and we don't understand that it's nonsense. We think it's really true. We have to hide it. We have to defend against anybody finding out what's wrong with us. So first of all, I want to see the world as a reflection of my overall state of mind. And the specific people that show up or that are annoying, so to speak, are now giving me very specific information about what I hold against myself that's totally unwarranted, is totally untrue. So my problem people are mirrors. You can call them mirrors or messengers. They don't know that, but this is what our learning is all about. So that we then can go, oh, now I see what I need to address. And I'll take one more step, and then maybe somebody has a question at this point. People will go, this person is so, and I'll say, fill in a blank, like give me 2 adjectives. It's like, well, they're so selfish and they're so rude. Let's say my mother-in-law or my kids or my next door neighbor or my somebody. And then I'll say, can you ever in your whole life think of a time when you've been rude or selfish? And of course, 100% of the people will go, well, yeah. And then a really important question is, okay, let an event that you can think of come into your awareness when you were rude or selfish. I said, I don't want to know anything about the details. I just want one of those instances to come into your mind. And it's like, okay. And then here's a question. And I have to tell you what the answer will be. I'll say, at that moment, when you realized you were being selfish or rude, at that moment, not from today's perspective where you might know more, but at that moment, was there any other choice than to make the one you did, which we would label, an observer would label rude or selfish? And 100% of the people say no. It's like this was a survival thing at that moment for you. And when you were doing whatever you were doing, it was the highest and best you were capable of at the moment. Not later, but at the moment, with whatever was being triggered in you. So this is, you can begin to see, oh, there is a process by which we can claim and own our behavior, but recognize, but when I did that, not when my adversary over here, when I did it, it was all I could do. And I say, well, how about, what if they're in the same boat? Whatever is going on, whatever is being triggered in them, they're doing the highest and best they can do with the sense of survival, which has been threatened in them. And then you can begin to take a look at this from an entirely different, we're in the same boat kind of a situation. That's kind of the first part of this.
Thank you, Carol. I think we're going to have questions more come in as we all get to speak here and really have input. But some of the things that you've said, certainly for me, the first thing you said made me laugh, because that perception of people aren't out there to drive us crazy. I think they are. I think people are out there to drive us crazy, because driving us crazy means we're out of our mind. And as soon as you get out of your mind and you can't think, you're either reactive or you could stop for a moment and say, where do I want to be? Heart or mind? As a course student, when I see I'm being driven crazy, it's always, it's the same thing that you're saying, a different route. You know, it's like, oh, I'm out of my mind right now. I have to see that that person is showing me how to get out of my mind and back to my heart.
Yes, another great way to say it.
I mean, it's all the same. But when and lately we've been saying, certainly the foundation, instead of anyone saying, why is this happening to me? It's, why is this happening for me? Which really puts a different view, just as you were saying. What is this really about? What is this for? And so I'm just trying to enrich and enhance what you're saying here.
Perfect. By all means,
well, as one thing that you just brought a memory up for me. Now, I don't think we always need to go to the world of form and thoughts and things that happened in our childhood
Yeah.
to release them. I mean, some people don't even know if they've been abused or not, if there's false memories coming in, if there's not, you can still go in and see what the feeling was and let go of it. But I had a situation when I was 3, and because you said 3, it brought it up to me, which was that there were slinkies. I don't know if anyone remembers a slinky, but it's a child's toy, and I wrapped it around my leg by accident and twisted it all up and kind of broke the thing. And I went into my mother and I told her that my brother, who was 3 years older than me, did it. Johnny did it to me. And she pulled my brother in and said, "Why would you do this?" And he looked, he said, "I didn't do it." And to this day, I don't know why she believed him, but she did. And I got punished and I got put in my room, and I was I remember leaning against the door crying because I'd never been put in my room like that before. And I heard very deep within, "Remember this. This is the first time you've lied." And then the next thing that came through is, "This is what they do here." And it was so profound to me that it was also exhilarating. Oh, whatever goes on here, people do this. And isn't this interesting? Consequences. I can't put it into words, all the feelings that I remember feeling that moment of, am I a grown-up? Am I, everything in that one little 3-year-old moment. Did I have a choice to do it any other way? I think I did it to get to that moment. But then I found out from a doctor years later that especially with autoimmune disease, you can trace it back 10 years earlier to an event, supposedly a very specific event. And 10 years later, I came up with an autoimmune disease when I was 13 called vitiligo. And in that, I had to trace back as an adult, what was the connection? And the connection was that I got split between being one with spirit to moving into the world of form in a way that was conscious and choosing to tell stories. And I'm not calling them lies. That moment was a lie, but I mean to tell stories about ourselves. I felt guilt because I split from spirit and chose to be in the world of form and act in the world of form. And it was a very profound thing for me that I really had held guilt about without knowing it. And to go into this had to happen in that way in perfect timing in the world of form, but it never actually happened in the dream. It was a dream. Yeah. And so, it was an extraordinary instance for me of seeing the actual split between child innocence and coming into this world of form. And how do we forgive ourselves for all the belief systems that we have that are fed to us by ourselves and others in this world? And at that, I'd love to invite Jim or Robert. And Robert has been a student of Carol's. So I see you nodding your head about what she's saying, because actually, Jim, if you wouldn't mind waiting for a moment, I would love, I would love to hear from Robert for a moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it is a pleasure to be here, and thank you, Tam, and also for Carol for sharing all of that, because I'm learning even more, and I deeply kind of resonate with both of your stories and descriptions of this. And Tam, one thing that you said really struck me, because it's one of the things that I take a lot of great comfort in, of thinking about it in my mind as that there never actually is a separation, that mind and spirit, mind and heart together are always unified. We just forget it in a moment. And in that moment of forgetting, we terrify ourselves. And what is so powerful about what you said, Carol, is like the idea of people and the villains in the world, whether it's a situation that we find ourselves in or a particular person that is driving us completely crazy, that they are actually there to rescue us. And they are literally a part of us and connected so deeply to us as like the knock at the door, trying to help us begin to see. They're not thinking this, of course, in their minds, but they are literally there to help us discover that we no longer need to hurt ourselves anymore. And it's been a very powerful experience for me that Carol has guided me through for many years now, of it really like the idea of forgiveness, which is so interesting that it can be kind of simplified down to a couple of very like practical steps. And I'm all about practicality because it's very hard and challenging, especially with the course of like, what do you do with all of these words and all of these abstract concepts? And it can get very heady sometimes and very hard to live out in the world. And I know that that's a big part of what this conversation is. And for me, that's one of my kind of deepest values with A Course in Miracles is how do you actually do it in the world? And I think of Carol as being such a incredible visionary and master with this, of helping to disseminate it down to what do I actually do? And this process of just notice how you feel, just start there, that one beginning step. When do you feel bothered by anything? And the moment you feel bothered by anything at all, whether it's a small bother or a giant, like, oh my God, I'm having a panic attack or I'm furious and in a rage, like that is the moment you know that's the knock at the door. Somebody, something is trying to remind me of what I need to heal and forgive within my own self. And it's been a very, very powerful process for me and for many that are even not course students to begin to practice of letting go of the judgment that it is the other person or the other situation's responsibility that is making me feel the way that I feel. And reclaiming that is incredibly powerful. And when we have that sense of power back, really big things can begin to change.
What has been one of your greatest challenges in this that Carol has helped you and the course has helped you move through?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the things that has been kind of a repeating issue in my life that I've chipped away at, I'm not entirely there yet, but I've definitely had some big growth that two of my previous relationships have helped me with a lot, is a deep sense of just feeling very intrusive and problematic in the world, but for no specific reason, just some deep sense of like me just being there is a problem. And so I've had people in my life that have shown me that, of being like very intrusive their own selves, like being incredibly aggressive or being just way too much, where it becomes a problem in quotation marks. So that discovery and beginning to kind of trace back to the emotions that are kind of stuck within the body of feeling deeply unwanted and just like I'm some kind of concern, like this deep sadness and anger that comes from that, and then being able to process those emotions. And that's one thing that I think is a common challenge, and it's certainly a big challenge for me, is skipping over the emotion, like not actually being willing to feel the pain, because we can't ever get to the actual healing, the forgiveness part, until we actually feel the pain.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And that is so tough to do. And Carol has taught me so much about that. Yeah.
Thank you. And it's such a, a lot of people who come in new to spirituality feel like it seems there's a spiritual override about feeling pain. I am one with God. I am blissful. I am happy all the time. And then stuff happens. I mean, stuff happens no matter
Shit, what do I do?
whether you're completely in alignment with love. In this world of forms, stuff is still going to happen, and it's how we walk in it. But I like, especially for our audience, to hear you say that you're chipping away at it, because it doesn't necessarily happen all at once just because you realize this is the choice you want to keep making. And to shift is sometimes it can happen over a long period of time in layers and layers and layers until one day you are so surprised that there's hardly any layer left at all, and the trigger isn't there. And on that note, Jim, come on in. Come into the conversation in your very real, beautiful way.
Oh my gosh. So much has already been said. I want to go back to the beginning, Carol, when you talked about forgiveness not being like a pardon, or I think it's so important, like what you were just talking about, Tam, for those of us that can be sort of spiritual bypassy, to recognize that some things aren't okay on the worldly level. And I think where forgiveness comes in, it's like recognizing that something that isn't okay is ultimately okay, because my willingness is to see the truth of innocence being the permeating truth of existence. And it's come in waves in terms of just being overwhelmed with how much of a relief it is to be willing to perceive innocence and to be willing to feel innocent, and to just remove. It's sort of like, coming out of a movie where you love all the actors, knowing that they were just all playing those different roles, but it was just a movie. And so to me, what I believe that the Course, the way that it taught me about forgiveness, was it's not really that forgiveness is a thing. It's removing the stuff that doesn't exist. It's like taking us back to a neutral state where we're not so controlled by our emotions and our projections and our judgments and our pain, to where I can just be present and take like the worst situation or thing that anyone's done that I've done, and have this compassion. Like you were saying, Carol, like looking back in that moment, did I have a choice, or did that person have a choice? And it is remarkable how I know Ho'oponopono gets into that too. When we can I'm trying to think of a real life example. I can't, but I know examples where pulling out the judgment and just being willing to come empty with saying to Spirit, like, guide me in this. I do not know why this happened or what it means. And actually with myself, Tam was alluding earlier that I've been on an ego level, I've been giving myself a really hard time lately because there's some major errors I've made. And I believe that the thing about the Course is it takes things out of the realm of sin or being bad or wrong, to just realizing that, we're going to make mistakes. And I started doing a thing just the last couple of days as almost like a fun habit, that I'm just counting mistakes instead of doing anything about them. Just go, I just made another mistake. I just made another mistake. And it's like to just recognize that I made an error, I made a mistake, but I learned something from that, So I think that I've been beating myself up a lot in thinking that, like you were saying, Carol, that I had a choice with some major mistakes that I made, primarily around not knowing about investments. And it's fascinating that on not as bypass level, but there's another level at which, when something that you've done, where I've done my absolute best to try to make something turn out a certain way. And like when I look at maybe like 80 different things I did, but each one of them guided me to where I am now. It's like I just got to start laughing, saying that, okay, I'm supposed to be here in this experience of what it feels like to feel what it's like to have made mistakes. And Tam brought me in on this specifically because I am having a hard time, like with forgiveness, to just not make anything more of it than just recognizing that this is the present moment, this is where things are, and there's a whole wealth and a whole world of gratitude, gifts, things right now in this moment that I can miss when I'm in that place of beating myself up. So thank you, Tam, and everyone, for letting me be here today to have this conversation that is really the fundamental, I think it's the fundamental relief that the Course provides us from what our egoic programming can do to oneself.
And there's another step that I feel in that, which is, here's Jim is saying how he's counting his mistakes. And the Course teaches us there are no mistakes. There are no mistakes. So you're still pointing out all of the things that were mistakes that brought you here to experience this pain and suffering, but then the release of the pain and suffering. Whereas in some ways in this dream, we are puppets doing things that have been perhaps pre-written for us to do to get where we are. We are the actors playing in the scenario. And were all those things really mistakes, or just as Carol and Robert had shown us, the people out there are gifts to us, so are our actions, are gifts to us to bring us to an awareness of none of those were mistakes. My soul has been aching to get to this understanding. And this understanding can be very challenging to get to because we are so attached to it. Like I said, that when I was 3, that instance of the exhilaration to participate in the world of form, it makes me understand the wave in adolescent girls who are cutting. Not something I've ever been interested in, but understanding this feels real. This is how I will express the pain, and it feels real. And to get to the other side of it, as it actually isn't. It's that feeling that we are alive, instead of finding the feeling in our heart to open up what life really is. Because we get so involved in the world of form. And I do not in any way mean to be simplistic about cutting. I'm talking about one little aspect of it that felt similar to me being exhilarated, like I just lied. How amazing. And I've talked to adolescents who actually get thrilled at the fact there are consequences to actions, and it's worth the punishment to do something. And that's with brains that have the frontal lobe fully developed. So it's interesting to see that aspect of it. But I would bring it back to you, Carol, at this point. Like, how does one, we can say, okay, I made a mistake doing something about investments, and here I am in this situation. How, and we can move to, okay, so that wasn't real in the dream. How do you come to someone who's just lost a child, or someone who's lived through the Holocaust, and say that wasn't real? How do we express that through the course with still holding compassion for what that person is going through? Because I would never say to someone who lost a kid, hey, it's not real, this is all a dream. Like, no.
Not. It's like, and the course doesn't say, hey, walk around saying something's not real. There's nothing in the course that advocates anything like that at all. And, you guys have brought up the important thing about emotions. And I have often said, if I could just get the world to just stop and give me 10 minutes, we could clear up a lot of stuff at once. And that is, we have been taught, most of us, for most of any kind of centuries that we're related to at all, that there's something the matter with our emotions. Why do you think the world is filled with all the things that people are addicted to? It doesn't matter what it is, drugs, alcohol, sex, food, whatever it might be. It's to avoid feeling how we feel. And you go, how did we turn our own feeling nature into the enemy? Well, of course we know, because if you cried, you got, or whatever, and you got spanked when you were little, then, you've developed this idea that expressing gets you in trouble. And so we need to rethink this. It's very important. I often say there's a short term, what we have to do, and there seems to be a problem or something that has to be resolved, and there's the long term. The short term is we have got to set aside what we think is the problem, whether it's a family problem, a political problem, a next door neighbor problem, whatever it is. I need to set the specifics of the problem aside first. And then I need to allow myself to actually feel not only the sensations in the body without any commentary on your ego mind. It's like it's going to be put in a corner for a while. Or just simply the emotions. And I'll say, just notice where the sensations in the body are. And just, if there's sadness, let yourself be sad. If you're angry, that's a different level of emotion and it needs to be addressed first. So, because you've got a bunch of adrenaline running through the body. So pound on the bed with a tennis racket, run around the block, do whatever you have to do. And then underneath that, you will find despair, hopelessness. All those words mean basically the same thing. And when we touch that, we have to, in a sense, imagine that we're putting our arms around that emotional state and kind of bringing it to us. What we tend to do is push that away. It's like, no neat person is going to have emotions that they have to deal with. Well, that's very stupid, because we all generate the emotions from things we believe that aren't true. So if we don't address that, and you might say, but why can't I push them away? Well, because they won't push. Just because you want to push them away doesn't mean that that's what's going to happen. And so what I need to do is imagine that I'm just kind of putting my arms around them like you had an upset 3-year-old. You would just pick them up on your lap and you would hold them and you would take care of them. And you want to do that with your emotions. And here's what happens when you do. That which transforms our upset resides at the core of our own being. So when I want to push this away, I'm pushing this away from where the healing takes place. One time in an astonishing kind of meditation experience that happened in 1984. You never forget a date when something like this happens. It was like, in whatever state I was in, I was meditating with a friend. All of a sudden, somewhere in my mind, I could see all these flames. And I could see that as thoughts and feelings came toward that flame, they vanished. And every religion in the world has some reference to the flame or the fire. In the Christian religion and in more, it's like the Holy Spirit, that which heals, is demonstrated or illustrated with a flame. And once you have had an experience like that, where you say, what you bring toward you is bringing toward where the healing is. It doesn't do any good to try to fling it out there. It won't fling. It's not going to go away. But I have the literal power of loving holiness at the core of our being. And if I will bring the difficulty to where the healing is, which is right here, then once the emotional state is resolved and I feel kind of whole again, then I'm in a much better position to deal with, you might say, the outer what happened, whatever the issue is, whatever I was concerned about before. But always, when something has been upsetting, then dealing with the upset first is absolutely essential if you're going to really fully heal anything. I hope that makes sense. As I said.
And I would love, it does to me. I would love to know, Carol, what kind of things still make you upset?
Let's see. I'm trying to think. Almost nothing. It's like because I think I really honestly do realize that everybody is kind of creating unwittingly their own reality. I feel like, and if some of the reality that gets created is pretty terrible looking, I don't have any sense of judgment about that. I just feel like I'm very clear about what the process is that you might say brought the distress to their lives or to my life when there has been distress. But for a very long time, I've known that I was doing this. In other words, that it wasn't being done to me. But one thing I think has to be emphasized about the way we relate with others and what happens when we release. This is really important. I want you to hear this. About 45 years ago, about the same time the course was coming into being, there was also an awareness amongst the psychological community, so to speak, that holding in emotions was an awful thing to do. And books started to be written. And of course, I just read every book I could find. And they advocated doing exactly what got me punished when I was little, which is to express your emotions, ask for what you want. Sort of standing up for yourself was forbidden when I was growing up during what's called the silent generation, where children were not allowed to be anything but little polite mannequins that made the family look good. You know, you didn't get to say no. You didn't get to ask for what you wanted. If you sort of acted on your own behalf, you likely got punished. You know, so that didn't work out well. So when that gets ingrained, then you learn not to express your emotions. And I remember when I was about 10 years old, I had stomach aches all the time. Nobody could find out why. Well, I know why. I know why now. I didn't necessarily know why at the time. And this recognition about 45 years ago that people need a way to express the emotions, especially the anger part. So my girlfriend and I got together at my house. I had my little boy stashed off with the neighbors, and in complete violation of everything that I had learned when I was a little kid, and you learn it well if it gets you punished when you express. This was, you learn to pound on the bed with a tennis racket and scream and yell. And I just can't tell you how hard that was, even though we were safely locked in my house and nobody knew what was going on. This was a complete violation of everything I learned. So we screamed and we yelled, and then it advocated like hitting. They said, throw dishes against the wall and watch them break. And I thought, well, that sounds like a very big mess. So we got a big block of ice at an ice house, which they used to have. And we took it out to some woods. This was when I lived in Denver the first time. There used to be woods around Denver, and we would take hammers and stuff, and we'd go out and scream and yell and pound on the ice and watch it break into bits and pieces. So in any event, this is enormously liberating. But let me tell you, fascinating thing that happened as a result. Now, I would never have told my parents anything about this because they just thought they were great parents, because they thought they produced a great kid and they were responsible and all that sort of thing. But a few months later, we went down to visit my parents for Christmas. And my father had always been a very nice man, but completely not interested in kids. And you know, he would talk to us and we'd have dinner together and so on. When he came home from work, he'd watch the news and read his books, and you know, like dealing with kids was not of any interest to him. And so on this particular thing, I thought, I think this next Christmas is the last time everybody in the family is going to be alive and well. So although it's a big nuisance to haul all the Christmas presents for the little kids and so on down to someplace else, we did it. And guess what happened? As a result of my releasing what was going on with me, I had a different father. Now, he didn't know anything about this. He seemed so glad to see me. It was like, as I say, he'd never been mean, and he always came to watch me and all the stuff I did. You know, he was a dutiful father, but an uninterested father. I walked in the door, and he was so glad to see me. And we had wonderful long talks like we had never had before. I felt so welcome in his presence. And when we left, he gave me another couple of $1,000 and said, I want you to have this in addition to your Christmas present. And it was my first unwitting experience of discovering that when I change my mind, then the people that I relate to are different. Isn't that an astounding thing? And I've seen that happen over and over and over again. So, and it turns out my intuition, which is very, very good, was right. This was the last Christmas, because later that year he had a stroke and died not long after that. But it was, and I have had experiences like that before, when I let go of something that was in my mind. The other people had never been informed about it. This was my own internal stuff. I let go of my stuff, and the other people get to be friendlier, nicer, more helpful. In one case where it was a next door neighbor kid that was driving me crazy, he just stopped the next day coming over. End of story. We clean up what's going on with us, and not just our own immediate circumstance is different in all kinds of ways that you can't imagine. Your relationships heal up. Things just fall kind of magically. I feel like I live in kind of a, I don't know, kind of a magic world now, where intuition just constantly guides you in the right direction. It's worth looking at what we have to let go of that's impeding the kind of life that we can have. And I highly, highly recommend recognizing that if there's a troublesome person or situation, it's kind of like, thank you, God, I'm unearthing something that I need to let go of that's going to allow the quality of my life and my ability to be helpful to simply grow and grow and grow. Like Bill's beautiful little prayer. You know, that little prayer is the only thing that did not come into the course directly from Helen. That was given to Bill. I'm here only to be truly helpful. He was assigned to go do a lecture someplace that he absolutely did not want to do. Bill was an introvert, and messing around with big groups of people was not his fun thing to do. And it was kind of like when he was required to say yes to this presentation, this was what he got. Like, remember, we're here to be truly helpful. Mm-hmm. So when we can remember that everything that we can do to release our old programming assists in our ability to do what our heart wants to do, which is to be helpful to other people. It's about the biggest win-win-win situation that I can think of.
And I love that you are here as a long-term practitioner of the course to show what your world gets like when you do the course so continuously. I'd like to say that one of the things we've kind of touched on also was what I didn't like about the course as a child and an adolescent when my mother got involved with it. And that was ignorant people, I'm calling them ignorant now, who got involved with the course and felt like they could do things that one might perceive as not kind, and someone would say, you're acting really badly. And the person would say, well, you know, that's your perception, so you have to clear up your perception, but you know, that's your problem. And you know, in the world of form, they were acting really badly. I think, you know, we could all agree that invading the Ukraine, many of us could agree, is not the best thing, the kindest thing to do. How do we deal with that type of behavior when my mother would always call it mixing levels, where there wasn't an understanding of what was going on? Is there accountability in how we behave within our own self and in our own alignment within the practice and the knowledge or the learning that none of this really exists? What does that mean in terms of our own behavior? Okay, so I can go kill everyone because this is just a dream. Well, on the deepest, deepest, deepest level, yes. But in the level of form where we are, where do we travel through accountability? And I'd love to hear from all of us. And so, Carol, if you're going to answer, we're going to keep it shorter so that we can all speak about this. But I I'd like to bring that up for people.
Well, a very short thing that I would say, I think it's very unhelpful to say, oh, this world isn't real, so you don't have to worry about it. That's as unhelpful in the moment and in the circumstances where we find itself of anything that I can possibly imagine. In other words, it's like that's avoiding all kinds of things. In other words, there's nothing that's empathetic about that. I mean, there's nothing that is loving about that. It certainly doesn't sound like there's anything helpful about that. And if being helpful is, I watch what's happening in Ukraine because I've been to Ukraine. I've taught Course in Miracles classes right in the heart of Kiev, right where it's being bombed right now. And I adore that country. I have friends over there. And it's like, and I think it's a horrible thing to be happening. And yet I don't find myself like I have to go to war internally within myself over that. In other words, so we could be in the world, but for me to say, oh, it's not real, it's not really happening, is just preposterous. And it doesn't heal anything to do that, frankly.
Thank you. And Jim and Robert, any jumping in on this?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with Carol. And I often find that, like, in this case, hypotheticals are often not very helpful, because they typically they're looking at the outside world. And I don't think the Course is really anything that is ever supposed to be about accountability for anybody other than ourselves. That the moment that we think about, well, how about this situation? How should that person be doing something? Or how should that thing be happening? That we're already beginning to miss the boat and already missing, like, what is the true power of what the Course represents. It's not a system of government. It's not there to help us relate in the world as people better together. I mean, it is kind of in a way, but only as we enter the world as ourselves individually. So I think whenever we go into that, it's the only accountability is really just for ourselves, is how I would think about it.
And then when we get into accountability for ourselves, that's when we're back to forgiveness.
Exactly. The whole ball game.
Yes. Because we are so completely hard on ourselves. And I think of forgiveness too, as we did a podcast on this morning, of really it's forgiving our construct to the Holy Spirit. And as we do that, there's stepping in of helping us to open up to another way of being. And, as Carol said from the beginning, we don't do this alone. And the asking for that partnership, and we only need the littlest willingness to ask for help to forgive. And so all of these situations that we can give to Holy Spirit is what we have for giving, so that we can come back to who we are in our state, so Holy Spirit can come and help with that. Jim.
So you'd mentioned that your mom talks about mixing levels, and we've often talked about in the foundation has a meeting that the volunteers and staff have on Fridays, and the thing about level confusion has come up so many times. And I was just thinking about how mixing levels sounds a lot clearer. Level confusion kind of describes it in the sense of, it is confusing to me at times how, asking like who is the I that is feeling what I'm feeling or is wanting something to be different than the way it is. And like you were saying a minute ago when you said that, ultimately, it doesn't matter in the deepest sense if someone does, horrible things and stuff. But I think in truth, if we're talking about the deepest sense of being consciously aware, then there would be only acts of love and kindness and understanding and compassion. So in one sense, it's not at the deepest level that it's okay, because at the deepest level would be the healing. At least that's the way I say it. I think because everything that's a miss or a mess is all at the surface level. And in my experience, being close to 70 years old now, is that like so much of what seemed messy is such a veneer. And what the Course helps us do is instead of focusing on that veneer and getting obsessed with, like right now, I mean, you turn on the TV, you listen to what people are talking about, you look at the world, you would think that this is the worst time ever on earth and everything's going haywire. And yet I know that having a more in-depth and a more wise perspective, there's probably more things going on today that are healthy and in order, and people communicating, and I mean, there's things at our fingertips that used to take lifetimes or multiple lifetimes to try to get an answer to. So I know that the whole thing about perception and projection, that the Course has helped me to basically surrender my egoic framework for this openness of curiosity, of being willing to, even if it's not true, but I believe it is true, knowing that what we call God only has all of our goodness in mind for us. The one of my favorite lessons is God's will for me is happiness, or perfect happiness, whatever that lesson is. That to be able to claim happiness for ourselves, and to wish, even if somebody is being the worst irritant, to know that in our hearts that we wish them joy and happiness, and that we wish them self-love, and for them to see, what it is that they might be missing and beating themselves up for. One of the things that's interesting, because I have been going through kind of a challenging thing on the worldly, like spiritually, I feel good, but on the worldly level, just having a lot of challenges, that I think I used to be really obnoxious because I was kind of used to my life flowing along, and I've had a pretty miraculous go of it. And now I have a lot more compassion and understanding for life can be a bitch. Things can be really hard. Things can really hurt. Losses suck. And especially when it's, a person, a loved one, or an animal, it's like to recognize how, even when my father passed away, I remember I had a brief moment of sadness, but I was so what's the word I want to use? I kind of thought of myself as like Mr. Magoo. I was so embedded in my belief system that I just saw him being free, and I felt that he was done. Like he earned his graduation. And I remember all my family members telling me I was crazy. I was bypassing my grief and my pain. But at that time, it was very true for me. And it wasn't until a relationship broke up many years later that relationship was kind of like the avalanche started, where I started realizing that I had so much grief and so much pain that I'd been carrying, but I always wanted to frame it in my spiritual ideals of knowing that the ultimate truth is that there is no loss. The ultimate truth is that we aren't our bodies, that we don't live in time, and so getting back to the level confusion, I recognize that instead of trying to figure it out or claiming that I know, I just kind of ride the wave of times I feel less confused and times I feel more confused, but I know enough to know that I really, as Jim and as an ego, as a personality, I don't know what is going on. But I do believe that love, joy, connection, compassion, peace, all of these things guide us to what is like. And I guess I want to take this one moment too, like right now, right here, as we're talking about it. So, like right now, if we could just all take a breath together and all recognize whatever thoughts are going, whatever judgments, whatever way that we're doing our personality, to just all together, just to be willing to just let that, just release that to spirit and just say, isn't it beautiful and wonderful that we are joining of our hearts right now, and we're here to remind ourselves and each other that there's more than what it looks like. And we wouldn't be doing the course if we don't have a very clear idea of what this is. So I just want to extend the love and appreciation and gratitude I have again for being here.
Thank you.
I have to say one really important thing about that. It'll take me 20 seconds. And that is, when we carry those ideas about we want other people to be comforted, and we want them to be understood, and we want the best for them, to remember that because the thoughts are in my mind, that gift that I'm offering to everybody else also accrues to me. The thoughts are in my mind. That's coloring the nature of my life. So the more we want the best for others, the more we want to understand them, the more we want to be helpful in whatever way we can, the more we want to recognize that underneath the behavior is the loving presence that they really are. It's like, we're not just doing them a favor, I'm doing myself a favor, because if it's in my mind, it becomes my experience. So it's like giving the best to others or wishing well to others is like the greatest win-win-win that we could ever engage in.
Thank you. And that moves right into, giving is receiving, and it's all one.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
One of the questions that has come up has been, how and why is there so much resistance to forgiving? And what is that resistance about?
I didn't hear resistance to what?
To forgiving.
Oh,
Yes. And why, when we know that it would be good for us, why is there so much that keeps us from doing that, or it takes so long? And so just wondering what you have to say about that.
anybody else? I've taken up too much
Nope,
time.
nope. We're all in it together.
Yeah. I can jump in with one little comment there. I mean, I think for me, what my consistent resistance is that it is still very, very uncomfortable to feel the way that I feel. And so the resistance that I experience is that I am not always willing to actually experience the pain. And in order to actually go through forgiveness, you have to feel the pain. And so for me, that's the biggest level of forgiveness. It's either the mental part is like, well, I don't think they're willing, and I'm not even willing to begin to touch it yet. But once I get past that, then the next step is, I'm not sure if because sometimes it's very scary. It can be very scary when you begin to dip your toe into the giant, or what seems to be this giant ocean of pain. Once you do it, you begin to discover that it's not going to destroy you. But I know early on for me, there was a big concern about, like, I don't know what happens when I open up that door. Like, I don't know what monster might jump out, or if everything about my life will just kind of crumble if I allow some of that to come out. But thank God, with a lot of help and support from Carol and others, that I realized, oh, wow, it is painful. It really sucks, but it's not that bad. And it does, like, the feeling once it is processed is absolutely incredible. There is nothing better than the release and the relief of letting go of pain.
And sometimes it's, there's so many different characteristics that we have. And sometimes it's not even just fear of pain, it's wanting to be right. Absolutely. Yeah. And there is the question in the course, would you rather be right, or would you rather be happy? That's a really big question, because sometimes I've noticed there have been moments in my life where I would rather be right than happy. And to unwind that, to unravel that, to see what does that mean for me, and to know that I could always, at every second, choose peace instead of this, is part of the work in the course. How do we get there? I would say to people who ask about the resistance, keep practicing, keep applying the principles, and the resistance will start to shift on its own. I told my partner when he asked me, and he was not a course student, but we were starting to do the workbook lessons together, and he said, what do I need to know to do this? And I said, absolutely nothing, because it will show you. You don't have to believe in it. You don't have to know a thing. Just do it and watch what happens. And then you tell me what you start to know. And so all the talk about resistance and I can't do it, I won't do it, keep doing the practice. It will unwind it for you.
I, I'd like to jump in that it occurred to me that I wanted to just clear up something too. When I talked about counting my mistakes, what I meant is like I was hanging a curtain rod yesterday, and I just put a little bit of extra weight on it and it broke the holder for it. A week ago, I might have gone, and I might have gotten mad at myself, but I just went, oh, oops, mistake. And that's what I meant as far as counting the mistakes, just like recognizing that a day is not going to go by when I'm not going to do something that I wished I wouldn't have done. But to take away the significance and just go, oops, and move on that's been it's been an accomplishment for me. And I've also actually been looking at like, what did I do that worked out really good, and counting those things as well. But I realized that without being conscious, I was subconsciously beating myself up for every little thing that happened, thinking, oof, you idiot, you did that, and it's just, again, it's the programming, but just watching that take off. So I wanted to clear that up. There was something else. What were you just saying? Because it was about.
I don't remember.
Okay, the second thought just popped away. I just lost it. Oh no, I just okay. It's a big one actually, and I don't know if this is appropriate to ask, but what I'm aware is we're talking about forgiveness, and especially talking about pain and the things that we carry in our lives. I'm so aware of how relationships and the closer relationships are so impactful, and maybe this is too much information, but in my marriage, my wife tends to be a bit of a samurai, kind of a harder person, and that was hard for me, feeling like there's times when I felt like I needed more support that she was willing to feel comfortable with, and she was kind of looking at me like, "What's wrong with you? Why do you need so much support? You're a man, like man up." Recently, because of the stuff I've been going through, I have a dear friend who has just out of the blue kind of shown up like an angel. And I mean, in a really major way. And also the foundation meetings on Fridays have shown up in a way. And it is so remarkable. And this is not making my wife wrong. She's perfect and wonderful the way she is, but recognizing what it feels like when there are souls that have my back, our back, and to recognize what it feels like when there isn't anybody, having our back on the worldly level. So where I'm going with this question, and this may not be an appropriate question to ask, but I was telling Carol before we started that I just reread Never Forget to Laugh. And one of the things I kind of missed the first time through years ago was how Bill and Helen had such a tumultuous go of it. And so I just was wondering if there's anything you can speak to, because one of the fascinating things about the Course to me is that this is a spiritual, just a major spiritual, I don't know what to call, what do you call this? This amazing body of work, that unlike other things that we have no idea like how it really came into existence and whether it was really true or who did it or whatever. I mean, these were two super accomplished, most amazingly decorated, professors of psychology and all this stuff that were so brilliant in their own right, and who obviously loved each other and cared about each other a lot. But what struck me is that whole idea about them being committed to there being a better way, but even after that, still struggling in terms of, so I was just wondering if you can speak to how that kind of fits into this topic of forgiveness and what you learned from being, Bill's friend and having such a close view of that.
Are you addressing that to me? Or
yes, Carol. Yes, to you, Carol.
Yes.
It was like, it was a long, slow process for Bill. I only talked to Helen once on the phone, but of course I knew Bill very well. I'd go out and visit all of them, and he would come and stay with my family. And, he kind of became part of the family, so to speak. And he was aware of this process of projecting onto others what he was afraid of within himself. In other words, he became more and more, he knew from things from the psychological point of view, but from the more spiritual point of view, he had to learn right along with everybody else, and so he would practice, as you remember in the book, he would practice with people in the office and practice with other circumstances of not making Helen wrong because of whatever was being stirred up in him. In other words, but he didn't just with the snap of a finger get the whole story. He had to kind of learn this step by step as well. He had the advantage, if you want to call it an advantage, of being very tuned in to his own guidance, which he obviously followed. And the dichotomy was fascinating, that when they were working on the course, everything was just great. It was smooth. They cared about one another. They were appropriate in their responses to one another. But keep in mind that when they were working on the course, they had the goal. This may be my words, not theirs, but I know that it applies. Of they were in the process of being truly helpful, so that the focus of their attention was on something that was loving and appropriate and helpful and good and so on and so forth. And then when they were not working on the course, it's almost like they fell back into their ego selves, where they were each blaming the other for whatever it was that was going on. It was just really a fascinating thing to hear about. I didn't know him while all of that was going on. I met him right after the course was published, and he dropped in my lap, so to speak, not literally, although one time almost. Bill finally was so worn out from the years and the years and the work and everything that went into this, and with this peculiar relationship with Helen, that on, I don't know, maybe the second or third time he came to visit, at one point, the weight of carrying all this, plus being one of the most famous psychologists in the world. I mean, it's not like he didn't have a big load on his shoulders, that we were sitting talking in my living room. Of course, it was the daytime and the kids were at school. And he finally broke down and he cried and cried and cried. And he was a big, tall guy. He was spread out on my sofa, and I was trying to hold his head like he was a baby that needed to be taken care of. And it was like, but there was so much that was pent up within him, as there is with so many people. But he had we will call it his karma or whatever, to have the course, to be involved with the course, and to keep putting it into practice more and more and more and more, and to just finally allow that emotional breakthrough that we were talking about earlier, and how important that is. He allowed that to happen in a place where he finally felt safe. And it was an important turning point for him, as he continued to, as it is for any of us, when we feel like we're with people and in a circumstance where it's safe. Robert, you were talking about, it just feels so unsafe to allow myself to feel how he feels. I've often said, Robert reminds me more of Bill in many ways than anybody I've ever met, which is a big compliment.
Thank you, my dear.
I want to bring this a bit together, and I've just moved to honor what time of year this is in the Jewish tradition. And we're right in the middle between the Jewish New Year and Yom Kippur, which is the Day of Atonement, meaning something different. But there is a core in that of Yom Kippur. I remember going to temple and standing, even as a young child, for an hour in the Amida, where you review all the things that you felt you had done wrong for the year, and you ask for forgiveness of God for that. And obviously, in course terms, it's the same thing. It's not much different. In you're doing a look at what am I holding guilt about in myself, in my actions. And I remember just this, everyone fasts for a day in the conservative and Orthodox Jewish tradition. And you go into the temple, and as a kid to stand with all this horrible bad breath everywhere, with people, singing in a dissonant way, please forgive me, please forgive me. And the beauty of it too, in asking for a forgiveness, not only for what one has done in the past, but what one will do in the future. And the humanness of what and who we are in the world of form as we try and really try to clean out and do better. And there's a beautiful tradition that I like in Judaism in this window of time in the week between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, when you feel you have wronged someone, even though in course terms you have not in one way, but you have the opportunity to seek that person out and ask for their forgiveness. And if they won't give it in the classic term of forgive, you ask 3 times. You knock on the door, and then no matter what, you're absolved. And I love that practice, and we can do that internally to ourselves too. Do I forgive myself? Do I forgive myself? And it's time that we all take that step. It's a very holy time of year right now to join together, and to really, the course brings us to such a deeper level of what forgiveness is and how to practice it. And I thank you, Jim, for giving us that moment to remember that for each of us to come through in this moment. But we have a few more minutes left, and I'd like if we could each summarize what we would like our audience to go away with. What is the kernel in this about the practice of forgiveness, or any aspect of this that we would most like for someone to leave this conversation with? And Carol.
I think I would like for people to realize that the things that you think are the matter with you, and the things that you think have done wrong, first of all, there is no past. The moment something you've done wrong, it doesn't exist anymore. There's only right now. And right now, in this moment, I can change my mind in any way I choose. And I can choose to be helpful. I can choose to be kind to myself and to others. And I can choose to follow my guidance. And since there is no past, there's only my present programming. I can continue to watch it, upgrade it, and life gets better and better and better.
Love that. Thank you, Carol. And Jim?
Ooh, that's a great question. And my desire, my wish, actually my will, that's the other thing I was reading about the course, talked about the difference between wishing and willing. My will is that right here, this moment, right now, whoever is watching, that in whatever way that you've noticed something that might have been an obstruction, hopefully that is lifted to where in this moment there is a sense of release from self-judgment, release from the worldly way of looking at others and ourselves, and truly feeling a sense of, the course talks about the authority issue, that to know that although we may make errors, that God doesn't. You're not an error. That this whole idea that so many religions have about sinfulness and what you've done wrong and having to earn the love of God or whatever to be forgiven, that no, your natural state is innocence, is perfection. And everything else on top of that was this mad idea that we had to pretend and create a game and play and be something that we're not. So without it sounding egotistical, my wish is to leave from this conversation with a smile and with a serenity and a clarity about the innocence that it has no opposite. That the love is all there is, and you are love. I am love. We are all love.
Thank you. Robert?
Beautifully said, Jim, and Carol as well. Beautifully said. Mine is going to be very short. Well, I'll also have something else to it too, but mine is really only 2 words, and it's welcome everything. There's one thing that I hold deeply in my life, and I would certainly recommend, is to just welcome everything, the good, the bad, the beautiful, the ugly, and the transcendental. And it reminds me, I just recently got a new tattoo, and it was inspired by a poem that I deeply love. So I'm just going to read a version of the poem, a short excerpt from it, by Rainer Maria Rilke. And it's as if almost he was a course student, because it's so aligned in many ways. Life speaks to each of us as it walks through our bones, silently out of the night, saying, go to the limits of your longing. Flare up like a flame and welcome the big shadows. Let everything happen to you, all the beauty and the terror. Just keep going. No feeling is final, very close to the graceful truth of life. Give me your hand and I will meet you there.
Beautiful.
It's beautiful. I missed one thing about that. Are you going to put that whole tattoo on you?
I didn't put the whole thing. It's a piece of art that was inspired by it.
Oh, okay. Okay.
That'd be a lot of words.
A long tattoo, but people have sleeves, didn't know. But
That'd
very
be cool.
Thank you. Thank you. I will say, saw something about the atonement and someone confused about it. And just the simplest way is to think of it as the at-one-ment, remembering back to who we are, and just keep remembering that we are love, come from love. Anytime you're in doubt, you're in wrong mind, and know the difference between the two so that you can give that to yourself and to others. So we could talk for hours more, as we know, but it's about time. And thank you. Just welcome your forgiveness opportunities, because you will be released from them. All of that, all of the resistance as you practice. So thank you. And I hand it over to you, Selena.
All right. So fantastic. Thank you, Tam, and everyone. We want to thank our guests for this discussion, and of course for all of you, our attendees, for joining us today, and as well as our team at the Foundation for Inner Peace, our staff and our volunteers. And we of course want to give our appreciation for all those who donate to these Let's Discuss webinar series. It's really your donations that keep these events coming. So thank you so much. Before we go, we have just a few announcements, including news about the webinar topic for next month. So if you are here with us live, keep an eye on the group chat and we'll be posting information there. First, we want to make sure you know about our weekly Miracle Voices podcast, and it's co-hosted by Matt McCabe and Tam Morgan. You'll be able to hear students share reflections on how A Course in Miracles shifted their outlook and fostered healing through forgiveness. So if you haven't checked it out, you certainly can at miraclevoices.org. Web edition. Are you one of the 40,000 students to use the A Course in Miracles web edition every month? For the last 2 years, the course students from around the world has been able to search the entire course, access the daily workbook lesson with one click, and even listen to the workbook audio with the Foundation for Inner Peace's complete online publication of A Course in Miracles. So we want to make sure that you know about it. We still get questions. Know that donating to the web edition will help us keep it going and be able to translate it into different languages. For you to check it out, you can do it online at acim.org/ACIM. All right. You'll want to stay tuned for next October. So Foundation for Inner Peace will hold its next Let's Discuss session on Thursday, October 26th. And we're having a live Q&A for all those who submitted questions live or in advance. And there's another opportunity to get them answered. So wanted to let you know about that. If you subscribe to our foundation announcements and newsletters, you will be emailed soon. Additionally, you can always check out our website's event page at acim.org/events. So we've created a short story that will display on the browser when the session ends, a short survey, pardon me, that will display on the browser when it ends. So please give us your feedback for today's session. And with love and gratitude, thank you for being here. And we look forward to having you next time. Take care.